Guys, welcome to chapter 16, part 3, more patterns of inheritance. So, so far we are going, so far you have learned monohybrid and dihybrid, and that's pretty much revision, right, from what you already know in O levels or SPM, right? So, right now, okay, we're going to ignore chi-square for a while. I gave you the exercise that you can do. Next week we'll discuss. But for now, we are going to a little bit more complicated things, i.e. more different types of inheritance. Okay, so there's not just monohybrid and dihybrid. There's not just normal, dominant, and recessive. There's also like in between. Okay, and we will talk about that. Okay, so these are the many things we'll talk about today: sex linkage, codominance, multiple alleles, gene interactions, and autosomal linkage. I hope to finish these 5 things today, but they are all very different from each other. I want you to be very clear, not confused. So if at any point I'm going too fast or maybe you are confused, please let me know and I'll repeat. Okay, it's okay if we don't finish it also, we will just continue next week, okay? And last but not least, with mutation, I am going to pre-record mutations because there's a lot of theory involved here, less of practical stuff. Right, so again, you learn monohybrid and dihybrid, okay? But it doesn't work the same, as I said, with all alleles and phenotypes. So these 5 things are based on these things, right? So what if there are sex chromosomes involved? Now, sex chromosomes are not like normal chromosomes, right? There's XY and XX. It's not entirely homologous in males, right? Because it's not XX in males, it's XY. What does that mean? So that would be sex-linked, okay? What if it's not exactly recessive and dominant? What if there's an in-between? That would be codominance. Don't worry, I'll go through this again, but this is just a little introduction. There is sometimes there'll be more than 2 alleles involved, and this would be called multiple alleles. So you might have 4 alleles, and you know every individual would have 2 of the 4. So how would that work as well? Number 4, what if the expression of some genes affect other genes? Okay, so our genes are not like standing alone. There are also many other genes. What if they interact? And therefore, that's called gene interactions. And last but not least, right, all of the above always assume, okay, monohybrid, dihybrid, all of these always assume that the alleles are on separate chromosomes, that the genes are on separate chromosomes entirely. But what if the genes are on the same chromosome? And that is called autosomal linkage. And this is where we'll talk about linkage groups in more detail. Now, again, it's just an introduction. Don't worry if you don't completely get it yet. It's just a snapshot of what's going on. Let's start with the first one, sex linkage. We'll draw a few genetic diagrams, and then we'll move on with life. Hang on, let me check one note. Okay, so the first one is a fly exam. Great. So I know where to switch. Okay, let's talk about sex linked. So we learned monohybrid, we learned dihybrid. This different, okay, but some of the same rules apply. Okay, why is sex linked different? Because the allele or gene is carried on a sex chromosome, usually on the X chromosome only, not the Y. Okay, why is that? No pun intended. Y chromosome is shorter than X. So this is the male Y chromosome, right? It's shorter. It's like we call it a truncated X, which means it's a shorter X essentially. And it carries fewer genes, and it also carries some genes that X do not. They do not have the same genes on the same loci. They are not exactly homologous. Okay, we call it hemizygous, but that's a term. Oh, there, some genes exist on a single copy only, right? And we call them hemizygous. Means maybe X got, but Y don't have. Or maybe Y got, or X don't have. Okay, so there are some different genes from X. And X also have some different genes from Y. Some same lah, but some different also. So what we learn would be this, right? We will learn what does X-linked recessive mean. So the gene is on the X chromosome, not on the Y. So so just X-linked, and is a recessive allele. Okay, what if it's X-linked dominant? What does that mean? Right? And Y-linked. Actually, Y-linked is a thing, but it's currently not in syllabus, so we just ignore it for now. Okay, Y-linked we ignore. We just learn X-linked recessive and X-linked dominant. All right, let's talk about X-linked recessive. Like the name suggests, it is a recessive allele on X. Phenotype is determined by a recessive allele on X. So it will be expressed if there's no dominant alleles. It functions like the normal recessive allele you know. Okay, for example, hang on a sec. I don't know what's coming out. All right, so I'm just going to show this stuff. For example, this recessive allele will only be present. Okay, this recessive phenotype will only be present in females with both recessive alleles, but males, because they have XY, right? So they only need one recessive allele in order to have the phenotype. Usually you always need two recessive alleles, but because Y doesn't have that gene, it doesn't matter. Okay, so genotypes for sex-linked genes are special. Okay, this is a special part. The symbols for gender will be used. So XX is female and XY is male, unless it's told otherwise. Okay, sometimes in that question, they will switch organism. Then they will say, oh, female is different, male is this. Then you follow the question now. But unless they tell you, assume it's XX for female, XY for male. Right? And then you're going to write the alleles as superscript. So we could write big R, okay, this is for eye color, big R for the dominant allele, and small r for the recessive allele for white eyes. So these are the possible genotypes here. Okay, it could be a female. Hey, do I have the next? Oh no, I don't. All right, this is XX, so this is a female. It's too low. Female, and this has a dominant phenotype. So this one, dominant is red eyes, right? So red. This one is female, two recessive alleles, so it's white eyes. Don't write anything yet on paper, yeah? This is female and red eyes. This is homozygous dominant for this sex-linked allele. And this fella is male, XY. And because of the red allele here, Y don't have anything. Realize, don't have anything here. Nothing here. Don't have anything here. And that's okay, because Y doesn't have it. Only X has it. It's X-linked. This fella is red, and this is also a male, and this fella would have white eyes. So these are all the possible genotypes. This is just an example to show you how to write the genotype. Now let's look at what may happen. So now we are focusing on the white eye allele. Yeah. So the white eye allele is X-linked recessive. So what do we do? What do we do here? Okay, so this is a scenario. Okay, and we're gonna write the Punnett Square later, but let me explain. So you can see here that a red eye female, okay, we call it the wild type. Wild type means it's normal type in the wild, right? Has big X, big R, big X, big R, XR, XR. Okay, white eye male, however, has the recessive allele here. And when you cross it, very interestingly, you would have 75% of them having, oh, so sorry. My bad. This is P, this is F1. This is F1 cross. So after this happens, this produces F1, and all F1 have red eyes, which makes sense, right? Because this dominant phenotype has passed, these two dominant phenotype has passed down to both female and males. Okay, so all are red-eyed. Some males, some females. If you cross them with each other, red-eye female, red-eye male, this is F1, you will get this ratio right here. you realize that all the white eyes are males. Okay, there are red eye females and red eye males, and this is 75%, right? This is 75%. But all the males, all the white eyes are males. This is the 25%. All right, so why is this the case? So we're going to draw Punnett Square. To do this, we need to draw two genetic diagrams. That's why I said you have to prepare a lot of space. I don't think I prepared enough also, but let's try it together. Okay, I don't know why I'm erasing. Let's discard anything in equation. Let's go to OneNote. Let's figure it together. I hope that you're writing as we're talking as well. Okay, is this your class? Yes, it is. Very good. I'm gonna copy paste this. All right, so first genotype, right? We have big X, big R, big X, big R, crossing, oh, sorry, that's phenotype, big crossing with small x, small r, y. Okay, let's start with this first. This is the parental phenotype, which is white. This is a red eye female, and this is a male that is white eye. What are gametes? Again, this is the same, the gametes. Okay, the alleles will segregate, right? Remember the law of segregation, and therefore this is diploid, this is haploid, this is meiosis. So you only have one letter per gamete, two letters. Now we have one letter, but in this case, there are two types of gametes. Makes sense, they separate, right? This only got one because there's only one type. And we can draw a little Punnett square here. Draw while I talk, please. Try it out. Compare your answers to the screen. If you don't draw, I think it's very hard to imagine, especially when it comes to more complicated things like today. So you have this genotype for your offspring. This is your F1 offspring. The table is saying it. All right, so this is red and female, female red. All right, female red. And this is male red. So what's the ratio or probability? Or you can say it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and you can say all have red eyes. Very interesting. Okay, you can see how the recessive allele here, is masked by the dominant allele here. Whoops, I'm sorry. Okay, this dominant allele is masking this recessive allele, and you can see here that the dominant allele from the female that has red eye, because it's homozygous dominant, is a wild type, it's considered purebred, right? You can see that each and every offspring would inherit one dominant allele that's on the X chromosome. And therefore, all have red eyes. Again, if I'm going too fast, let me know. Now, in the next generation, this is the F1, that's the parent now, and the offspring is F2, yeah? I'm just going to bracket it like this. Now, F1, I'm going to change color for fun, right, is red eyes crossed with red eyes, but it's F1 crossed with F1. So, phenotype is female red. Whoa, not so thick, please. Female red crossed with male red eyes. This is the F1 generation, and you can copy back the genotype from above. Big X, big R, big X, small r, X, small r, big R, sorry, and Y. All right, then you can plot the gametes. Now you have two different types here. Separate the alleles from each other, separating the alleles from each other. Then you draw a little Punnett square. I strive to draw better Punnett Square from now onwards. I have failed, but it was better than the previous one, I think. Okay, big X, big R, circle. Big X, small r, X, big R, Y. Cross. I do like this chapter a lot. It's like a game. It's like a little puzzle. You read a question and you like figure out things. I think it's sort of fun. Don't you think it's sort of fun? You don't? Never mind. Maybe I'm just a nerd. You know. I'm just talking to myself now. Alright, so anyways, this is female. Oh, that doesn't make any difference. Purple it is. Female, red eyes. Female, red eyes. Male, red eyes. Male, white eyes. Ta-da! We have now proven that, hey, probability of getting red eyes, well, for flies, is, hey, X blood, 3/4, which is 75%. How about probability of being a male or probability of getting female? %50. See, 2 to 2. So it's 2/4 or half or 50% chance. It's 50% chance. But probability of getting white eyes. Okay, I'm gonna write it like your friend Yongyi has suggested because it just makes things easier, right? Probability white eyes, can write like this, no problem. 25% is 1/4. Being male white eyes is 1/4 as well. Okay, can you see it? Chances of getting male or female is always 50-50, right? It's true. Like, chances of getting male and female is always 50-50, but then the phenotype will differ. Phenotype as in the trait, like in this case, red or white eyes. All right, so the question here is, why are all the white eye males? And the answer is because, well, this fella here is recessive. And the only way the recessive phenotype will be visible is that either it's paired with another recessive allele, which you can see here don't have recessive allele, right? The male don't have recessive allele, but it does have a Y. And a Y, because it doesn't carry the allele, okay, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count. So when a recessive allele is paired with a Y, it's always expressed. Okay, I'll say that again. When a recessive allele from the mom, okay, is inherited by the male, which will have a Y chromosome, that recessive phenotype will always be expressed. So males, in that sense, are always more likely to show that recessive phenotype. I hope that makes sense. All right, I'm going to pause a while because I realized I went through that quite fast and you need time to process. So I'm going to zoom out, or you can look at OneNote. OneNote, I'm editing it live right now. Oh man, it's small. Hang on. All right, so if you go to OneNote, I think you'll be able to see it on your computer as well. I think sync I'm taking live, but it may take some time to sync. Let me know how it goes. Anyway, your friend asked, but it's still possible for female to get white eyes. Of course it is. A female will get white eyes only if its genotype is X small r, X small r. So homozygous recessive for that particular allele. And this phenotype can only occur if, right, the parents, the male parent is like this, and the mom is either this recessive, homozygous recessive, or heterozygous for that particular sex-linked allele. Only then this is possible. So it's possible to get for female to get white eyes only if the mom has a recessive allele and the dad has the recessive allele, because everyone inherits half from the mom, half from the dad, right? Require to be a brain exercise. Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes so that you can write this down, process, try and figure it out. Now, I realize that sometimes it's very hard to imagine in your head. It does require like practice for your head to spin really quickly and talk about it really quickly. So for now, calm down. Let's erase this. Come down and let's work on it genetic diagram by genetic diagram, case by case. If you can't figure it out, draw it out. Okay, that will be the easiest way to get the question. Don't get it, draw it out. Need processing, draw it out. Drawing will really help. So your friend asks, so will the recessive allele be expressed more in females or expressed in females? Both sexes have equal chance. Well, on a general note, the recessive allele has a higher chance, not expressed more, yeah, expressed the same, it's either expressed or don't express, but it has a higher chance of appearing in males because males only need one allele for it to be shown. It doesn't need two. So got a higher chance just because of that Y chromosome right there. It's just a higher chance. But again, not confirmed. Like, it depends on the scenario. So again, for beginners like you, right, you do need to draw it out. Then maybe you get a better picture. Then you go like, okay, now probability of male and white eyes is 25%. Probability of getting red eyes is 75%. By drawing out the Punnett Square, you can see the ratios physically. Then it's easier. And Yongi, you're right. This is why males often portray recessive phenotypes like being colorblind. We're going to do more examples. Come down. We'll get there. Okay? It's true though. It's true. Especially if the disease is sex-linked. So color blindness is sex-linked on the X chromosome, and that's why males often have it, and a lot of females are just carriers for color blindness. Right, let's not go there so fast. Let's move step by step. I'm going to move on to the next one. Yeah, I think it's this one. Yeah. All right. Let's do the next slide. So moving on from the idea of X-linked recessive, the reason why actually those X-linked recessive and X-linked dominant are actually very related lah, right? Because if there's a recessive allele, that means there's also a dominant allele. But when we talk about diseases, we usually say that, hey, color blindness is X-linked recessive, which means color blindness is carried by a recessive allele on the X chromosome. That's why we separate it out like this. Right, so when we talk about X-linked dominant, let's focus here on, say, a disease. In this sense, in this case, it's just unknown disease. So this disease might be X-linked dominant. And this is quite interesting. Now, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see better. So X-linked dominant is obviously the phenotype being determined by a dominant allele on X. So it's an X chromosome, it's a dominant allele. This is what causes, in this case, a disease. So the phenotype will always be shown in anyone who has the dominant allele. So homozygous dominant or heterozygous females or males with dominant allele. Cannot imagine. Okay, let's use a different alphabet for now because let's not confuse. So homozygous dominant means like this. So it could be like this. Or heterozygous could be like this. right? And males with dominant allele, like this. So all these three phenotypes, I'm going to write that again, are going to show that phenotype. Okay, the pattern of inheritance is quite interesting though, because the affected males will never pass the dominant allele to the sons, because the son must inherit the Y chromosome. And if the dad has a dominant allele, it's always going to pass to the daughters, because the daughters must inherit that one from dad and one from mom. This is assuming that the father is affected. So we see the little diagram here. The father, again, has the X-linked dominant allele. The Y will be passed on to the sons, right? So you can see that the sons are unaffected, but the daughters, however, will always inherit one from the mom. The mom doesn't have it, okay? But the dad's X chromosome will always go to the daughters. So the daughters are affected because, again, they are heterozygous for it, but the disease is the dominant allele. All right, so in this context, let's draw a genetic diagram to figure it out, to visualize it properly, because I know some of us here need to draw the genetic diagram in order to, figure it out. Don't worry, I did too when I first started. So we're crossing a male that's affected by the disease with a female that is unaffected. All right, before I move on, I need to remind you to correctly label your genetic diagram. So maybe on top of your genetic diagram, you tell yourself, this is X-linked dominant, like in really big writing. If not, you might get the different genetic diagrams mixed up. Anyways, let's go on here. So the male is affected, and obviously, not obvious. Well, I guess it's obvious because it only has one X chromosome, right? So it must be on the X chromosome. Y don't have. Females unaffected would be big X, small a, big X, small a. Again, the disease is on the dominant phenotype. If you are easily confused, like sometimes my sleepy brain is, you can write let equals disease allele. X, small a is normal allele. Okay, reminder to self. This is more like. Now let's look at the gametes. I'm just going to continue using this pen because it's a nice, beautiful color. Yay! So those alleles are going to separate from each other. So we have this, all right? In this case, it's homozygous, so I'm just going to draw one. All right, so let's draw the Punnett Square next. Maybe I can use a ruler on my writing pad. Haha, no, it still sucks. Whatever. Okay, so we have big X, big A, Y, X, small a. So you get this phenotype, this genotype, and this genotype. So this is male, unaffected, and female, affected. The ratio is 1 to 1. You can realize that the probability of getting a male or female is still half-half, right? The probability of being unaffected or unaffected is half-half too. But the probability, okay, phrasing here, of a female, so if it's already a female, having the disease, okay, probably a female already set, having the disease is 100%, isn't it? If the female will always have the disease, always, if the dad is affected. All right, I'm going to pause again, let you process, let you stare at the genetic diagram and figure this out. I'm going to show you the slide as well. The statements on there might help. Oswald say why the dominant allows disease? It just is. This is just an example. There are some diseases that are really on the dominant allele. Somehow the mutation has made them more dominant. All right, I'll wait another 1 minute for you to like draw the diagram and like process a little bit. Ask me questions. All right, so someone asked, means the fruit fly one also is X dominant allele? No. Fruit fly one, we were focusing on the X-linked recessive allele, the white color eyes. I mean, the focus is different. But yes, the red color eye one is also X-linked dominant allele. But the reason why we learn both like this is because some diseases, we say, are X-linked recessive, and some diseases are X-linked dominant, and you see them very differently. The focus is different. The concept is the same. So it's a good question. Yeah. Again, the focus is different. It's the same concept. The white eye for the flies that we saw just now is actually a mutation. It's a mutant. Oh, sorry. It's a mutant, so that's why it's the problem, the not normal one. Right? In this case, the disease is the one that's not normal, and it happens to be a dominant allele. Again, same concept, just different focus. The way you draw genetic diagrams is the same, just the way you talk about it is different. All right, with that, I'm going to move on to the next example and show you something called a pedigree diagram. So a pedigree diagram is something that comes on exams as well. It looks slightly different now. This is not a genetic diagram. This is a pedigree diagram, which shows you the family tree, essentially. Round is female and square is male, always. Okay, and black means it's affected. Okay, shaded means it's affected. I always think to myself, males are more square, not true statement, but just a memory tool. Right? Males are always more square and females are all rounders. Feminism. No, I'm kidding. But that's how I remember it, so I don't get confused during the exam, because sometimes they really don't tell you. Okay? Right, so by looking at the genetic diagram, sorry, by the pedigree diagram here, we can tell through the pattern that is inherited whether it's homozygous or heterozygous and why they are all affected. Maybe. So let's start off with trying to figure out their genotype. So we can see here that it's X-linked dominant, it tells us, thankfully. Okay, and we know that if a male, right, is male, has the disease and is affected, it must be this. This is confirmed. Affected male. Right, affected female, on the other hand, right, could be this, could be heterozygous, or it can be homozygous. Correct? Right. So based on this, we can figure out like what's going on here. So we can see here, we can write the ones that we know first. Males that are affected, definitely X, big A, Y. X, big A, Y. Now we can see here that there are individuals that are not affected, unaffected. This is an unaffected male, which is definitely going to be like this, right? Must have a recessive allele. Unaffected female, is definitely going to be this recessive, homozygous recessive for the allele. Because again, it's X-linked dominant. The disease is carried by X-linked dominant allele. So we can see here there is an unaffected male, right? So this fella could be big X, small a, Y, for sure, confirm. This fella here, female, definitely homozygous recessive, right? Which brings us to our last one here, right? Which we'll figure out by figuring out the parents. So based on what we know so far, that is confirmed plus Chap, yeah, we can see that there are some males with the big A, some males that is the dominant, and some males that have the recessive. This means the mom is heterozygous. Why? Because if the mom is homozygous dominant, everyone will have the disease. Everyone will have the disease. But now we know some don't have and some have. This means the mom is heterozygous. Okay, if not, how would this female inherit 2X with recessive? 1X for the recessive allele, one recessive allele is inherited from the mom, and one recessive allele is from the dad. So this dad obviously actually should have written this from the start, is definitely like this, confirmed. Now from this, then we can do this one. We know that the mom, right, the female needs to be heterozygous or homozygous for it to be affected. But it's no way that this female can be homozygous, because this female will inherit this X from the dad for sure, right? Don't have any X to inherit. And this female is affected, so must have inherited the dominant allele from the mom. Allele, okay, whatever, you know what I mean. So now, just by looking at it, just by looking at patterns, we have figured it out. Now, how do we answer this question again? Let's write it in words so that people are clearer, is clearer for everyone. So, is female 1, which is this one, homozygous or heterozygous for the allele? The answer is heterozygous. Yes. Why? Because, okay, we can say that, I think it's easiest to use this fella here, right? Female 6 inherited. Female 6 is homozygous recessive. She inherited 1 recessive allele from that, and 1 from mom. Just in case they're dumb, female 1. That is male 2. Right. I hope that's clear. Now, let's move on to the next one. We can see here the alleles that are pretty set. Okay, and from here we can figure out the genotypes of the females and males. So the females will definitely have a dominant, like this, right? And then the males will definitely be this. Okay, why? Because the females will definitely inherit, the affected females will definitely inherit a disease allele, the dominant one, from the father, okay, and 1 recessive one from the mom. The males, on the other hand, will always inherit the Y from the father, and because it's just one type of gamete here, 1 recessive, 1 from the mom. So why are all females in generation 3? This is generation 3, it's generation 1, generation 2, generation 3, right? Why are they affected? Because all females inherited XA, big A, which is the dominant allele from the father, from dad, which is individual 7, male 7. Or you can just call it 7 actually. All right, process. Fill in if you have your slides printed. You can take, or I find drawing it very hard, but sure. Just saying it's on OneNote, this is accessible to you. So this is the first pedigree diagram you have ever seen. I'm sorry the first one is so hard. Maybe I should have introduced this earlier in monohybrid and dihybrid first. But it sort of makes sense still, right? Anyways, actually, in many pedigree diagrams, just by looking at it, you should be able to tell what kind of inheritance it is. So whether it's autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive, autosomal means it is not sex linked, right? Autosomal dominant means that the gene, the allele, is on the normal one. So this is probably the normal, think of the normal monohybrid, just the normal one. So it could be autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive. So maybe not linked. So big A, small a, small a. This one is talking about this allele, whereas this one is talking about this allele. Okay, different. Right, just by looking at the pedigree diagram, you can tell. So if it's autosomal dominant, right? If there's 2 affected parents, that autosomal dominant, wait, can we process this? Alright, so autosomal dominant means that these 2 fellas must have the dominant allele. But if they have a child that is unaffected, this means the recessive allele is hidden in both. Okay, how about this? This must be autosomal recessive because the child is affected but both the parents are not. Means both the parents have the recessive allele somewhere, and this child has somehow received 2 recessive alleles. Okay, actually this genotype is the same. You realize that these 2 diagrams, again, is the flip side of one another. Okay, so this really depends on the perspective. So when we talk about this, we usually talk about disease, so affected or not. So when it comes to autosomal dominant, we're talking about the disease being carried by the dominant allele. That's why the ones that are shaded, these are the ones that have the disease. But when we talk about autosomal recessive, the focus changes. It becomes the disease is carried by the autosomal recessive allele, and therefore, right, the shaded one, the shaded fella, right, would have homozygous recessive genotype. You get what I'm saying? That the focus is sort of different, but it's related. It's the same idea. Now let's look at the X-linked dominant one. The X-linked dominant one in the 3rd generation, as we have seen just now, right? Especially when it comes to affected male, the affected male will always pass it down to all the daughters in an X-linked dominant sort of inheritance. Whereas in an X-linked recessive, if the mom is affected, right, because this fella here would be homozygous recessive for the mom, the males will all be affected, whereas the females are just carriers. I think this requires practice and requires some observational skills. And Okay, if you don't understand this, again, you can draw a genetic diagram, but we're not going to dwell on this too much. I think when we do practices, we'll figure it out. But this is just a cheat sheet for you if you need some visuals to move on. All right, now I'm going to take a break because my brain is also lagging a little bit. We'll come back to talk about codominance and multiple alleles.